There are times in life when you have to admit defeat. And sometimes they are right now. And there are times in life when you have to admit that the computer system has managed to beat you. And that's pretty much what happened to me. Sorry, I ended up having to restart everything and get it all to work again. And, yeah. It's fun. It's fun indeed. So I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry indeed. I hope you're all enjoying this. And, yeah, let's get a better thumbnail. Oh, right. So, if anyone wants an idea of what happened, Windows Defender decided to activate when it had been turned off, and it decided to shut down my microphone, and shut down XSplit, and shut down everything else. So Windows Defender and me are now not on good terms. Ah, well. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all well. And hello, Frank Spazada. Hello, Graham Highlander. Hello, Deadly Chorus. Hello, Adam Crow. Hello, Knight6831. Hello, Nautical Wolf. Hello, Domar. Hello, Teamy Locker. Hello, Dan Freeman. And you didn't miss that much from take one. It seems I went silent quite quickly. And it didn't tell me I was silent. You guys all told me I was silent, and then I was going, why is that the bar still moving? Because XSplit was still receiving sound, but don't worry. Windows Defender had decided that it was being awful, and so blocked it. All of us who wish that you could completely eradicate from Windows Defender from your computer, say A. I do not know. Me and Windows Defender are going to be having fun. Oh, I do not know. That just make sure I've got the right adverts going out for this, because I want people to know what's what. Sorry about this one. How is everyone then this evening? Sorry, it's life is fun. So, how are we all doing? He says, confidently hoping it's working still. Oh, I reserve the right to shoot Windows Defender designer. Hello, Oswitsky. Hello, Paul Beswick. Hello, Seneca Nero. Hello, Abzaski. Mark, Chris Mont, thank you. Dope Squad, thank you. Colin Cameron, I am renegaded from my laptop by getting a Mac. Me and Macs are definitely not friends, but even more importantly, several of my aunts have Macs, and they are watching, so I'm not going to use the phrase I use to describe their computer skills. Oh, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Let's quickly go to the Facebook page, make sure that's up to date so they know where to go to for that one. I don't know. Yes, I do have a Facebook page for anyone wondering why we have that set up. There is a link somewhere. Right then. So, thank you very much, everyone. Let's get into this. Evaluating the RN, Iran, and RCN T-26 frigates against World War II ship classes. What are they, and how does this fit their Navy's history? And of course, this is all thanks to the very lovely, very nice Wayne Borian, who, if I remember correctly, suggested this topic for patrons. So, it's going to be fun. I keep telling myself that. But also the fact is the Type 26 is rather an interesting class to look at and to start off with because they have quite an interesting genus and genealogy. In British terms, they start out as a future surface combatant, officially first talked about in 1998. So they're going to start entering service in probably we're talking 2022, 2023. They're going to be, well, they've yet to be launched. None of them have been launched yet, so they're nowhere near commissioning, but probably 2022, 2023 is a likely potential. And that means they will be under development for 25 years, a quarter of a century. In that time, the needs that have been requiring for them have changed dramatically. They have changed dramatically. And when you add in the fact that it transitioned from future service combatant to global combat ship, and now it's a ship which is going to be built in various variants by the Australians, the Canadians, and the British, there is a very different history going into these ships. There is also very different needs. And looking at the designs and talking about them, well, it became the obvious thing was to say, well, actually, this shouldn't be part of this. When I first saw the question suggested, I was going to say, well, it's kind of in the future, even if I am looking at the World War II ship classes which they came from. But then when you think about it, having taken 25 years to have got to this point, that's a fairly large chunk of history because, in the nicest way, in 1998, I was heading on for 11 years old, and I was just about to go to secondary school. I'd finished primary, and instead of waiting around until 13 to change schools, I decided I was changing at 11. Could have been to do with something of discovering I had dyslexia at the time, but we'll leave that to one side. So it's a long time ago. We're talking, I was very small, still wearing long trousers, because I was never one for wearing shorts under any circumstances. Me and Sheldon Cooper share that. But when this started, so it is history. This might be the current state of HMS Glasgow. She might finally have reached this point. But to get to here has been a lot of history, and then there's the World War II history involved. What are they going to be fulfilling the role of? So it's interesting. (9681). So IJN Shinano was to be a maintenance aircraft carrier, but really she should have been finished earlier. Not 9681, you are doing some lovely questions, but can you save them for brew ships on Sunday? Because that's going to be a very random brew ships, mainly because this has arrived. So I'm going to be doing ships, fighters, all sorts of books like that. Some cool stuff you can get, and that's going to be Sunday's brew ships. So I will be happy to talk about, answer questions on carriers and discuss carriers on Sunday. Today is all about the escorts. Well, today is all about whether it's a frigate, destroyer, or cruiser, or a sloop. Cameron, hello. If you want to avoid a fight, there are three things you don't talk about: religion, politics, and operating systems. Agreed. Nutty Hyper 1, do you know the difference between the three versions? Since Canada not going to be the same as the UK version? I do. And there is going to be a whole slide about them, Nutty Hyper 1, where I'm going to talk about them. Hello, Sean V. Hello, Steve Winnish. Canada hasn't even cut first steel yet. So Canada's one is entirely theoretical. Canada haven't even given theirs names yet. And the Australians haven't really cut steel. Well, I think they have cut steel, just. Or not or about to. I know there was a friend of mine talking about them getting the steel in place, so I'm not sure if they've actually cut the steel or if they're talking about it. Now getting lots of questions. Can someone tell Melanie 1640? She is here. Oh, here you are. There you are. Yeah. Thank you, Melanie. Sorry, I was just checking. Hello, Domar. Domar, I'm born in '88, so the plans are old as I am. Yes, this is what we're talking about. Belfast finally gets a new ship after 5 decades. How could the RM be so cruel to her? It's nice to have Belfast finally in the name list. Nights again, difficult to do when brew ships clashes with Formula One from Qatar. Look, if you want, I will have a word with the Formula One authorities, but I don't think they're going to take much notice of me. Asking them to move their racing for my history show is probably a little bit too much. Dan Freeman, is it a frigate, destroyer, or sloop? Yes, a very valid answer. Yeah. Seemingly, what genius decided to stop giving Royal Navy ships proper names for types and start calling them type? And when did they do that? They started that after World War II, and the whole point of the type is it's designating what its purpose is. So anything with a 2 prefix in front of it is primarily an anti-submarine warfare frigate, usually a first class. A 1 is usually a second class anti-submarine warfare frigate. Usually, he says. I forget what the 3s were for. 4s were AA escorts. 8s are general purpose ships, hence the Type 81, Type 82. And they had various. I think the 3s also were something for general purpose light ship. Team Looker, is the Type 26 as a good in ASW than the Type 23? It should be better. And I know that because I know the person who designed the hull for both the Type 23 and the Type 26. Well, I knew them. And frankly, they spent a lot of time on that hull. Let's see. Could you please check out Naval Battle of Guadalcanal? I will check it. I will try and get a copy to have a look through it. Jason, I want to see the Canadian Surface Combatant's 5-inch gun to be swapped for a twin. We all do. But the point is, the Type 26 has a lot of things riding on it. It has a lot of things there to be discussed. And a lot of points to begin with. It's gone to Cameron. Is this the ship you suggested should be upgunned as a bombardment ship on Biltrons? Honestly, I think they should all be upgunned. When we're getting into it, they all should have been upgunned, and I would like them all to be slightly better armed, but we'll get into this one. So, first things first, I'm going to make several of you very happy, because I've got lots of these. I really do. I have lots of them. This is the one produced by the Ministry of Defence. It's not the one I'm going to use for talking about them, but I thought you should see what they came up with. However, this one is a lot freaking better. So, this is the one I'm going to use for my discussions and to talk it through. Because it details everything. So, thank you to navalanalysis.com. And as you can see, this is a fairly comprehensive suite we're talking about. This vessel has 2 sets of 24 MBDA C-Sector cells. It has 24 Mark 41 VLS. It has 20 phalanx. And it has 30 millimeters. But it does have a 5-inch gun. Only a single one, but it's got a 5-inch gun. Let's put it this way. Sensors, radars, quiet hull, all these things I am very, very keen on, and I do like on the Type 26 design. And this is the British one, so this is the block, is the baseline design, you can say, in some respects, or the starting point design. The one thing I would say is I am. The trouble is, if you say you're not a fan of the Phalanx, people's then response usually is, well, what else would you have? What else is better than it? And that's the trouble, because there really aren't that many options. There just really aren't that many options other than the Phalanx. And I don't like the Phalanx, because not because I don't think it's got a good radar. It has a perfect. Not because I don't think it's a good idea as a system. It is a perfect cable system. However, there have been at several points various companies and various, even the makers of Phalanx themselves, Raytheon, have proposed versions of the Phalanx with bigger guns. And the reason is to stop the faster, bigger missiles further away. We all know that. However, consistently, because the US Navy hasn't wanted to do it, because honestly, I have no idea. They believe it's all going to be the laser route, probably, and they don't see the point in spreading their money thinly. They haven't done this. But the trouble is, now it's 2021. Lasers still have the same attenuation problems in weather as they have been for a long time. And whilst everyone keeps promising things which are going to change this, and I do admit there are a lot of promising options out there, which people are probably going to start quoting back to me in the comments, none of them are yet available for service and yet viable for service. So, here is the thing. This is why I tend to go, I prefer the 57mm or I prefer a 40mm. And at the moment, what we've got coming in is a Type 31, which is supposed to be the secondary frigate, which I actually think has a better close-in weapons system suite with two 40mm, one fore and one aft, and a 57mm at the front. So basically, it's got 3 guns to cover each side, and well, 1 to cover the rear, but 2 to cover the front. Than the Type 26. Now, the reason someone's going to turn around and say to me is, well, she's going to be carrying 48 Sea-Scepter missiles. So why should she ever need a Sea-Whiz? Why should her Phalanx ever be used? Because, as I've been talking about in the Long War a lot on bilge pumps, and this is my personal, real bugbear, even carrying 48 missiles, that's 24 targets. So you only have to be attacked by someone whose manages to fire 25 missiles at you, and you're going to want your Sea-Whiz to be something that can stop that missile. Now, we can go, oh, well, yes, she's going to have very advanced electronic warfare capabilities. Okay, so let's say you can take another 4 missiles out of play. Let's be nice. So that's 28. So they have to launch 30 missiles at you. The point I'm making, and this is the realistic, we are not building that many of these ships. If Britain was building a dozen of these ships, I'd probably be less worried. But we're building 8. That is the reality. These are premium assets now. It used to be that your frigate was your cheaper asset. Your destroyer was your expensive one. And your cruiser was your really expensive one. Well, we don't have any cruisers anymore. We don't have that many destroyers. And we are now putting into service something which is going to weigh in the displacement range of 8,000 plus tons fully loaded. Now, I'm not sure if anyone remembers when I did the whole various town class cruisers discussion, and talked about the crown colonies and all those, etc. But you might remember that fully loaded, well, in standard, that's the same displacement. That fully loaded, it's the same displacement roughly as the standard displacement of a Fiji class cruiser. It's more than a Dido class cruiser. And it's much more than an Arethusa class cruiser was in World War II. So I don't think it is me being excessive or me being absurd when I say I would really have preferred them to have had a better close-in weapon system fit. Now, here is the thing: if I keep the phalanx, quite happy to, but then replace the 30mm at the back, replace them, put in a 40mm, or put in something. You could have designed it with something better. You could have given it something with slightly more hot power, stopping power than the 20mm. However, this one, there's a lot freaking better, and some bloke who totally doesn't have a friend in the design department made it. Yeah. There are a few involved, but I do know one of the friends. Let's see. What is the what is the semi-transparent thing underneath the keel? Can go back to that picture. Various stabilizers, I think. I'm not quite sure. Oh no, that semi-transparent thing is the glass thing which is holding up the model, which they took a photo of. So that's just the stand. Karen, does the Type 26 have any FFB and W? Biological nuclear warfare capabilities? Yes. So, how does it compare to the Constellation Italians? To the Frems? It's up there. I actually probably prefer, for anti-submarine warfare, I prefer the City class over the Constellation. For anti-air warfare and close-in weapon systems, I possibly prefer the Frems. But we'll leave that to one side. Constellation's probably the halfway in between the two. Mr. Maverick, hello, 32. Is there a reason why warships don't seem to tend to have the pod screw set up versus the shaft screw set up? At the moment, it's certainly to do with speed. It's to do with speed that they aren't going. Because most of the pods are not designed for high speed, and the ones which are very expensive. So it's cheaper if you're spending a government's budget to go for the shaft screw setup. However, I'm not sure how long that will last, and I'd be interested to look at the Type 83s when they come in. Hieroglyph, but any cannon much larger than 37mm would not be able to sustain that rapid rate of fire, no? Honestly, Raytheon thought they could sustain that rate of fire with a 40mm. So I wouldn't, if I was going to trust anyone, I'd trust the people who already make it. And they thought that the firepower of 40mm would be enough. Choosing the Phalanx is a 20mm Oricon. It's now metaphorically 9045, and the cruise missile kamikazes aren't getting stopped by it. Possibly. Paul Beswick, if we get fusion reactors and all that stuff working soon, then I'll be a very happy man, but I doubt it. I'm not getting a Dirt Squad. What would happen if a laser-based sea closer weapon if the enemy put a reflective coating on their missile? It depends how quickly you burn through the coating. The next CO Edos is going to be lasers, so we're not going to spend any money upgrading the phalanx. And we're going to use the phalanx for the next 80 years, until the lasers are ready. US Navy in 1985, probably. Hello, Crazy Warrior Cats fan. Frank Speller, let's see, is it true lasers can't work in space, or does the atmosphere? It's more the atmosphere that's the trouble than space. As I understand it. As I understand it for our current laser technology. And remember, I'm a historian. So, I'm going by what people have explained to me. Mm-hmm. Right. Sorry, just catching on the chat and making sure I'm not missing it. Hieroglyph, 57mm equals 6 pounder, 37mm equals 2 pounder. It's not so much. It's so much more head weight. Menacing. What do you say? Sustained at rate of 540mm. What rate of fire is that exactly? Well, the current phalanx, and let me just get up this details. It's supposed to be. The current blocks are supposed to be able to do 4,500 rounds a minute. And remember, they do that with a multi-barrel design, so I'm presuming the way they got round it for the 40mm for a 40mm was they maybe had a couple more barrels or something like that. When I looked at the design, there is this design out there for an enhanced phalanx, an upgraded super phalanx, which Raytheon actually produced themselves, which was colossal. Cool, but colossal. But that's life. That's life. We'll do for it. And it, as I said, the phalanx is just not what I'd be going for. But the interesting thing you've got, of course, when you look at the city class and you go through them, is there's some very obvious additions and changes which could be made. For example, at forward you have 24 Mark 41 VLS and 24 Sea Scepter VLS. Now, currently, you then have mission bays and mission modules back here. But if, let's say, over the course of their career, you decide, frankly, this flexibility of the mission bay modules is lovely, but what we want is actually more missiles, you could always swap. You've got this space, which you could upgrade and you put in more missiles into. They're not fitted for, not with, but it's certainly space for expansion. There's also other things put in here. You know, you've got that flight deck space for a Chinook to land. You've got various options included into the design to give it as much capability as you can possibly put there. Hello, Jamie. And Freeman, the problem is the phalanx close-in weapon system has yet been demonstrated to fail, and it's cheapened in service, so not being replaced. Yeah, the trouble is, I would prefer to fix these things when they become a problem before they need to be replaced and fail. Khan goes back. Nope, in space, actually bleeding off waste heat is a serious problem. It is. Look at the amount of radiators they have to design into viable spacecraft. Also, a question regarding lasers. You might want to pass this track. Given the temps involved in hypersonics and how hot they would be to get a laser, and how hot they would appear to get, would a laser actually do anything? The interesting thing is that with hypersonics, with a laser, if you could theoretically get it to work, the actual increase in temperature could actually cause it to deviate off. No, so, yeah, current phalanx fires 750 rounds per minute per barrel. Curious to see a single barrel 40mm firing anywhere near 750 rounds per minute. Anyway, here is the Hunter class. Let's consider the difference. You will notice immediately there is a humongous mast appeared. Yes, for they have a different radar suite. They have their own radar suite, and the British uses an artisan radar, but no, the Hunter class have what is the Australians' own radar. It's powerful. You'll also notice that instead of having C-Scepters or VLS back here, they have quad launchers for probably some sort of naval strike missile, probably the NSM. And they have their missiles all forward in Mark 41 VLS. Henry, an 8-inch gun would have been lovely, but they're not going to buy one for the Type 26. Maybe for the Type 83, but not for the Type 86 because the cost was to take it off the shelf. If there's an 8-inch gun on the shelf ready for the Type 83, they'll go for that. But otherwise, they'll go for the off-the-shelf option. This is fault. I agree with the idea of extra modularity, but in real life, the Navy will actually likely underarm the VLSSR. No idea they would have maximized capacity, but the idea they would have maximized capacity is basically pointless. That certainly, it depends. I have to admit, it does depend. I'm fairly certain the task group, when they went to the South China Sea, were maximized. But I do agree, as a rule, no Navy seems to maximize the VLS they're going at sea with. Unless they know they're going somewhere where they are at risk. Dumont, how would you test the close-in weapon system of a ship without ruining the hull? I'd use something like the barge that we've got, the missile barge and testing barge we've set up for the Type 45 program. I'd have that moving along under tow somewhere with a close-in weapon system on. You could fit it with missiles, have it all run a full suite, and do a full test. What do you mean by maximize the VLS? Okay, so as a rule, if you are talking most navies going in the world, and we don't know, of course, about whether the Russians and the Chinese follow this practice, but certainly most Western navies seem to do. Yes, you might have 32 cells on your VLS, but in normal peacetime ops, you might operate with only 16 of those actually having missiles in them. So they have a sort of standard operating number. When you actually go into operations, you hopefully have them maximized. And as far as I know, the strike group, which the carrier battle group, which went with HMS Queen Elizabeth to the South China Sea, etc., all the British ships had theirs maximized. As well, I haven't heard that hasn't been officially sourced or anything like that. It's just some of the comments I've heard in discussions about it. For obvious reasons, it was a major deployment. It was a full deployment, and they wanted to do a full, as closer to the deployment test as they could. And one of those things they were testing was the deployment capability of the missile systems and of the VLS. So they did make sure they were all full. Geoffrey, I'd like to know more about this barge. There's a barge that they use for testing the Type 45 missile system and radar system. Do you have the well? Actually, today from down on. Do you have the Canadian version of Type 26? I do. But anyway, let's consider the Hunter class frigate in their full details. Again, electric motors and a gas turbine, and it's got 4 diesel generators as well, but they don't seem to talk about that here. Aircraft, it's going to be carrying 1 helicopter. Very happy to announce that the combat system is the Aegis with Saab Australian interface, which is why they have the huge radar, a mast, and everything else. It's you have to remember this is that mast and radar is the domestically built part of it. Is entirely Australian domestic and command and control system, and they're very proud of it, and that's why that's been included there. And the weapons. And this is the Canadian surface combatant. Am I the only one who thinks that they've changed the funnel to look like the Halifax class? I don't know how they've done it, because it looks it's got to be a very similar funnel to all the previous ones, but for some reason this looks more like a Halifax class funnel than any of the others. Hello, James Handley. Take 2. Have you had a look at Iron Breach's channel yet? As I said earlier, I'm planning on. Well, might have gone silent by that point. I'm planning on looking at that. I have it in my list of things to look at. I've been a bit busy with book proposals and setting up this sort of things. No, the Queen Elizabeth. Am I correct in thinking they have a relatively low number of available VLS cells? Well, the Queen Elizabeth's escorts were 2 Type 23s with sea scepters. I think both carrying full loads. I wouldn't be surprised, and 2 Type 45s. So, yeah, they had enough. Unlucky Hyper 1. Right. And as ever, this is more marketing for the RCN. It's quite cute. Honestly, it's quite cute. Now, here is the... Someone was asking where I was going to compare and contrast them all, and here it is. So, let's start off with this. The City class, well, you'll notice I have put in at the top the bilge pumps rating system. And remember, our rating is based on number of VLS cells. Okay? Number of VLS cells. It's not based on what you put in the VLS cells. its number of cells. So, the City class technically are 72. They're a third rate, and they are 6,900 tons in standard, 8,000 tons full. Hunter class weighing 2,000 tons more than that at full. And the Canadian surface combatant is a full 1.5 meters longer, but it's 0.05 meters slimmer. And, well, the official draft for the City and Hunter class is a bit of an interesting one, but I'm reckoning it's going to be around about 8 meters for some reason. You'll notice that the British list theirs as speed is 26 plus knots. The Australians is 27 plus knots. The Canadians is officially 27 knots. And yet all three have the same power supply setup. So we can all draw our own conclusions from that. The British crew are 157 core crew with up to 208, so they can load in 51 extras if they need them for various things, for mission needs. The Canadian surface combatant is going to be 204, and the Hunter is 180 with an extra 28 support being able to be chucked in. The Canadian one we know the most about the sensors of. I have to admit, both the Hunter and the City class, despite having names for them, are being quite reticent about what centers they're going to have. But we do know it's going to be a Type 997 Artisan radar. We know they've got a Sharp Eye navigation radar and a Thermoscanter 6000 2D XP and navigation radar. They have a 2087 towed array sonar and an Ultra Electronics Type 2150 bow sonar. They have Scott 5 SATCOM and Irvin GQ DLF decoys. The Hunter has the Aegis combat system using a Saab 9LV tactical interface. The CFA Technologies CFAR phased array radar. The Ultra 2S2150 hull-mounted sonar, i.e. the same as the RN one, but they're going to have a Fails Sonar 2087, again, same as RN one, towed array and variable depth sonar. Now, the interesting thing about the Canadians is they're going for, again, the same hull-mounted sonar as the British and the Australians, but they're going for an Ultra Electronics towed array variable depth sonar, apparently. The Sea Centaur S21700, also towed torpedo countermeasure system, is being integrated in that. Milka decoy electronics for the Australian one, and both the Australian and Canadians using variations on the Aegis fire control system, although the Australians are going for a solid state 3D ASA radar, an MDA solid state ASA target illuminator, and X and S band navigation radars. So they are really putting up, and they've said they're going to be fitting electro-optical and infrared systems, which are probably going to be fitted to the other two as well, but they've just been reticent about it. As you can see, technically, Hunters are fifth rates, and the CSG is technically a fifth rate based on the number of VLS cells, but their configuration has them as a Agamemnon-style third rate. So their configuration, the Canadians have 2 quad launchers for naval strike missiles, which is 8. They have 2 3-cell EXLSs for 24 C-sectors. They're all quad-packed. So they technically have 24 missiles, but they have 6 cells. So this is why you get the difference in being a fifth rate or a third rate. They have one 32-cell Mark 41 VLS, which can take ESSM, which can take SM2s or Tomahawks. So, you know, they could also quad pack in some ESSMs if they wanted. So they could be carrying, I don't know, 128 ESSMs if they fancied it, and as long as 24 C-Scepters. Anyway, they have 2 twin 324mm torpedo launchers, one 127mm 5-inch Leonardo, Otto 127-64 Volcano naval gun, 2 BAE 30mm autocannons, and 6 12.7mm M2 machine guns. The RN City class has two 24-cell VS for 48 C September air missiles and one 24-cell Mark 41 VLS. So hence that's how they get to the 72. They have a 5-inch 62 caliber Mark 45, two 30mm DSM Mark II guns, two Phalanx close-in weapon systems, two miniguns, and 4 general-purpose machine guns. The Australians, 2 4-canister advanced anti-ship missiles, which are probably going to be a naval strike missile, but they haven't yet really confirmed that one, technically. One 32-cell Mark 41 vertical launch system firing RIM 66 standard 2s or RIM 162s ESMs. Again, this means they could theoretically be packing 128 missiles. Or alternatively, they could be packing, I don't know, 24 standards and 24 ESMs. So theoretically, they could put themselves up to 56 missiles. But the thing is, they still have that number of VLS. They are still technically a 5th rate by the bilge pump system. And this is the point down here. We have notes. We have 8 announced, 3 under construction, and all 3 are to have the Rolls-Royce Mission Bay handling system, which is one of the things which is really going to make them flexible. But there are 9 planned for the Australians, and there are 15 planned for the Canadians. Now, remember, the Australians also have the Hobart class, and they have their LHDs, they have all their other ships. So they have a slightly different force structure than the Canadians, who are, in many ways, looking at these roles to fill everything. So for Canada, this is a one-stop shop. For Australia, this is going to be a primary surface asset because it's going to be the vast majority of their force. For the Royal Navy, if you've got 6 destroyers and 8 of these, and also got some Type 31s, it's one of your more capable assets, but it's going to be orientated around what you need it to do, which is primarily, this is the anti-submarine warfare escort. Did I hear Saab Australia? Yes. Will you ever do an overview of the War Emergency Destroyers? I think I have done one. If I haven't, I'll do it. I'll do one, but I think I have discussed them at some point. I'm always happy to do more. I like the War Emergency Destroyers. No, sorry. You also count Best Spook, Harpoon, Tomahawk cells, even if they're not VLS. Yes, we do. And hence, as I said, I've included the naval strike missiles. If they've got those 8, they're included. Might the Batch 2 Type 26 not be different to Batch 1 Type 26? Nope. Literally, the whole point is to keep them as similar as possible to make it as cheap as possible to build them. Nutty Hyper 1, 15 ships not set in. It's not yet, but Nutty Hyper 1, I can only put out the figures which are officially there. Currently, the one they're going around with is 15, so that's the one I'm using because that's the one I can find. If they change the figures, I will adapt it, but the figure I can find coming from the sources is they're looking at around 15, so 15 is it. Henry, I didn't realize on this had just how would you access City's anti-air capability? Could it be enhanced, perhaps as part of midlife update? It's fine. It's got a Type 997. Look, you need Aegis, and the reason these vessels have Aegis is because they don't have destroyers, and they only have 3. So these are also fulfilling roles of pretty much primary or lead air defense escort. and might well be their lead air defense escort in operations. The Royal Navy has destroyers and is going to have almost as many destroyers as it has anti-submarine warfare frigates. So the point is, these will be lead anti-submarine warfare vessels. They will not be lead anti-air vessels. And if they are, well, their radar will do in that circumstance, because that's a circumstance where a lot of things have already gone bad. Empress King George V. Isn't there already a proposed Type 32? Yes, there is, which will be a Type 31 modified. Robin Mutton. The Type 45 trials barge was called Longbow. I believe it was disposed of in about 2014. It wasn't disposed of in 2014. It's still sitting around. They've technically been trying to dispose of it since 2014, but as I understand it, the ship the barge itself hasn't gone, but they've taken some of the systems off it. 98 for 1. They're not going to. Don't take this the wrong way, but there are going to be lots of people who are going to talk about, oh, we could get Frem, or we could get Type 31, or we could get this or that. What Canada is going to do is going to do the same as they did with Halifax. They're going for a one-stop shop. So the problem is, if you're a small navy and you buy multiples of other ships, then you need those ships available. If you buy a large block, which is what they're planning, of one type of ship, then you always have multiples of that available. If I have 2 groups of 6, then I'm probably going to be able to generate 4. But if I have 12, I can probably generate 6 if I need to of a class. Because the more I have of one class, the greater the percentage I can achieve with operability. The cheaper the cost is on training, the cheaper the cost is on infrastructure, the cheaper the cost is on maintenance, on all those things. So I don't want, if I'm a modern navy, I do not want lots of little classes, because they suck money. I want one class which to do as many of the jobs as possible, because that is going to be cheaper. So yes, the Frem is better in certain circumstances, probably. The Type 31 is cheaper in circumstances. But if I'm talking about my force overall, and remember, we're not talking about building ships. We're talking about building a fleet. And when you're talking about building a fleet, you're talking about the economies of scale. And the Royal Navy is going for the economies of scale. It is because it's planning on forward basing the Type 31s. And this is the point. That is why it makes sense, because the Type 31s are going to be forward based. You don't want to forward base a Type 26. It's too big, too powerful, too important. You want it to have visit areas, but honestly, you need it at home so you can put it in your reaction group and send it out when you need it. You don't want it anywhere near. And interesting enough, they're building 8. So if you've got the 6 Type 45s, the odds are what you're going to get is 2 of those Type 26s are rolled for home defense, aka protecting the ballistic missile submarine, and they're doing UK waters. And the other 6 will be partnered up with the 6 Type 45s or 6 Type 83s, and they'll be put into 2 and 2, 2 and 2, 2 and 2 into 3 free escort groups. And one of those escort groups will usually be ready to go away with one of the carriers. And that's what the British will work on. And the Type 31s will be the ones on distant stations looking after the littoral strike groups and all those things, and until there's a war, in which case a carrier strike group turns up. With at its core, a carrier and 2 Type 83s and 2 Type 26s, or 2 Type 48s and 2 Type 26s. Hello, MC Legend 13. Don't they have the capability to network with a flagship with sophisticated NES systems? Pretty much all the British ships can talk to each other to a lesser or greater extent. 96831. Look at the Type 30. You're picking out some very nice older classes, which are true. The reason the Type 42s changed is because of some various experience in the Falklands War, but also the Type 42's role changed. Again, with the Type 22s had the Falklands War. Type 12s were changed throughout their lives. You more should probably look at the Type 23s. In which case, we built 16 pretty much the same. Barring we realised about halfway through that we had the flight deck the wrong way around. Adfab, any obvious temperature base changes? Not really. Again, you might think of it, but nicest way, the Australians have to go south into ice quite a lot because they have issues down there, and the British ones have to deal with the South Atlantic as well. So they've all gone for pretty much muchness. And it's the other thing you have to remember with the whole British Type 26 process is that we have tried to future-proof as much as we can. So, for example, a lot of the radars are coming off the Type 23s because they've had some of these radars put in their upgrades, and they've had various systems. So some of the systems are coming straight from Type 23s. They're going to a warehouse, being checked, upgraded if necessary, or modified a little bit, and then being put straight onto the Type 26s as they're decommissioning. That's basically the plan. I think the British are only buying the reason the first batch is being bought as it is because we bought the free, and we bought 3 sets of everything. And as they go into service, they're going to decommission Type 23s, take the stuff off them, and start putting onto the 5 that are coming afterwards. So this is a reason for the British processing. Right, be back in a second. Someone just knocked on my door. Hello, I'm coming. What do you want? Oh, pot's fallen over. Okay. Lord. The important thing to remember this map is that whilst years might have changed, a lot of those bases are still the important bases. A lot of those are still the critical areas. And a lot of the geography is still the same. 11 Type 23 SW and 5 Type 23 GP frigates be replaced with what the terrible Type 20. The RN didn't build the Type 23s as different. The Type 23s were all built as anti-submarine warfare variants. They only became different when someone decided that it was cheaper to cut the anti-submarine warfare. Well, actually, they didn't even cut the anti-submarine warfare, but they cut the tonal array sonar and took that off, and the various capabilities for that to try and make it cheaper to keep them in service and use them as forward deployed assets. So the general purpose Type 23s were built the same as the regular Type 23s. All the Type 23s were built the same. I know that because one of the general purpose Type 23s is HMS Montrose, which I can assure you my dad built as an anti-submarine warfare vessel. Submerged Swimmer. Hello, I don't think I've seen you before. The Parliamentary Budget Officer report came back saying the CSC problem will cost 77.3 billion. FREM would cost 71.1 billion, and Type 31 would cost 27.5 billion. I don't count the mixed proposal because it's stupid. I agree, and I would also point out the FREM is not as good as anti-submarine warfare as the Type 26. The FREM is probably better at anti-air warfare. I will concede that one. I concede that. But there again, the Canadians have gone for a version of the Type 26 which has the Aegis radar fit and all that stuff, so that might well improve its anti-air warfare capabilities. Why do Type 23 equipment need refurbishing as worn out? Most of the equipment we're talking about has actually been the equipment which has been fitted onto the Type 23s during the more recent upgrades. So it's literally been in service for a couple of years. Or a few more, the most about will have been in service a decade by the time it's 5 to 6, well, nearly a decade by the time it's transferred across. In which case, it would be due for a upgrade anyway, or rather, refurbishing. Imperial Fortresses. Well, this map is outdated, but it kind of works. It's from the logistic discussion, which I did a few weeks ago. And the fact is, the ports of the three navies, kind of for considering Canada, are same again. Halifax, Eskimo. But really, if we're talking about the RN in World War II, we're talking about the Royal Navy building a huge fleet. So this is the point. The RN in World War II has a large area to cover, and they have a huge fleet for it. They're no longer building a huge fleet. So one of the points and one of the things discussion is where would the Type 26s fit in this set? And that becomes quite an interesting thing because they do fit and they don't fit. And you're probably going to be surprised at where I say they do fit. So much similar. The Ivor Hudfeld didn't use fitted for, not with approach to weapons and systems. The Ivor Hudfeld used the Standflex module system, which means they're all built with the standard systems, and they get their weapons from the module from the Navy's whole supply of Standflex systems. So the weapons aren't procured as part of the ship builds because they come from a separate budget, which is the Standflex module budget. So when you're talking about the Danish systems, it's not when you're talking about British, you can say fitted for, not with. When you're talking about the Danish systems, it's not fitted for, not with. It's procured separately because they will some years procure new modules for the Standflex system, but they are procured completely separately to the ships. The ships just have these Standflex module nodes, these points which can take a Standflex module slotted into them, and they can be fitted and reconfigured as they wish. It honestly makes almost no difference which module is stuck in there. So it's different terminology, and it's a different way of procuring. It works for the Danish Navy. I would argue it could work in some respects for the Royal Navy and other navies. In fact, I would like to have seen probably the Canadians and the Australian navies operate on that way, because having a Standflex module system is very sensible. It's an off-the-shelf solution to this problem and allows you to readily and quickly upgrade your weapon systems. However, you have to remember there is a limitation with Standflex in that you cannot often fit as many weapon systems as you can with a Standflex system as you can in a custom specialized build. You won't get as many missiles normally from the same, in terms of the same space and area, in a Stanflex module system as you would in the same space in a regular build system. So there is fors and against. Cody, so basically the RN and friends are trying to get DDGs while calling frigates. Nope. Well, not the RN. The RN's getting a frigate. Colin Cameron, given the current issues, could you see a couple of stripped down Type 23s being retained as fast solution fishery protective vessels, like the US do, transferring to Coast Guard? Well, the US don't do that with transferring to the Coast Guard for starters. The Coast Guard in the US have huge their own basically frigates they buy. But and actually, I think there was a variation design submitted for the Constitution class, but they tend to supply them to other people, other navies, coast guards. The Royal Navy would probably buy more OPVs if they needed them. If they need them, they would probably get a budget for more OPVs. But honestly, what most people keep forgetting is that there is actually now, and this is the trouble the Royal Navy's got with its own budget, is there's now a different agency. There's Border Force, and they have their own cutters. They are not part of the Royal Navy. They are Border Force, and therefore you've got Border Force cutters. So you've got the Home Office are supplying their funding, which used to go to Royal Navy OPVs for fishery protection, and those duties to Border Force for their cutters. So the Royal Navy's OPVs have been changed into an overseas squadron because they're part of our forward presence and global presence, which is another reason why you've got the escort force being structured as it is. If you want to rebuild that capability, you need to start having money coming back from the Home Office to support the Fishery Protection Squadron, and the Royal Navy would quite happily have the OPVs because they quite like some more OPVs, because OPVs are a good, cheap place to start training officers and to train leadership. But they wouldn't use a stripped down 23 because it'd be too expensive. It would be massively expensive to run versus a Coast Guard, a Border Force vessel, or a River Class OPV. Fishery protection used to be, it is still led theoretically by the Royal Navy, but the fact is, without the budget, there is a reason why the RN's got the old River Class doing that duty, and they are still doing it. But unless someone gives them more money, they're not going to do more than they're doing. No one makes expendable ships these days. This is the Royal Australian Navy in World War II, and let's consider that. It's quite a cruiser-focused navy, let's be honest. It's got a few destroyers, but it's quite a cruiser-focused force, really. You've got Australia, Canberra, Shropshire. You've got Hobart, Perth, Sydney, and Adelaide. You've got an armed merchant cruiser, Hamadar. You've got Manora, and you've got Westralia. You have some very interesting mine layers. You have the tribal class destroyers, the Arunta, Warramunga, and Bataan. And these are the vessels which fight with them World War One through World War Two. Some of these ships, of course, get lost, but these are the Australian Navy through World War Two. It's a cruiser-based force, and there's a very sensible reason it's a cruiser-based force. It needs ships which are credible to operate over large distances, because nowhere is close to anywhere in Australia. And it also needs to be able to do that operations with a certain amount of capability, but it can't afford to crew that many ships because it isn't a large enough force to generate enough senior officers for that many ships. And I would say this because there's a lot of debate going on about Canada and the construction and the orders there going on there. Remember, any surface combatant has to be built in Canadian yards, in which case there are a limited number of yards, and they're not going to be able to. And the cost of tooling up a yard to build more than one ship and more than one type of ship at the same time would be absolutely prohibitive. So you would have to tool up a second yard, which would cost a lot of money and be open to a lot of political wrangling. And most importantly, and this has to be remembered, and this is the point which I make to the people when people start telling me FREM and all this sort of stuff. The main advantage for FREM over the Type 26 is its anti-air warfare capability. But problem is, if you open it up and say we want an anti-air warfare vessel, the FREM isn't the best anti-air warfare vessel the RCN could buy. The RCN could buy a Constitution class or something else. They could buy. The trouble is, the FREM is very good if you're in a Mediterranean context, and if you're looking at the current navies there, and it's very good anti-air warfare wise. But it's not the best anti-air warfare frigate. After all, there's a reason it lost out to the Navantia design for the Hobart class. And you're also looking at it going, well, okay, even in the Italian and even in the French navies, they have the Horizon class frigates, or they're based on them, which are probably their leading anti-air warfare frigates. So that's the trouble for the FREM. The FREM is a very good general purpose frigate. But you have a lot more cost if you go for a split buy. And if you're going for that cost anyway, the question becomes, why are you buying something which isn't as good at that job, which is presumably why you're doing that job? And I'm not saying the FREM is terrible at ASW. Please note, you can say something is better than something else at anti-submarine warfare without saying that thing is bad. The Type 26 is very, very good at anti-submarine warfare. It's probably got the best designed hull for anti-submarine warfare and the best in terms of the design around rafting, its machinery, and all the other systems of any design currently being built. This is not to say the others aren't good. When you're talking about best or not best, or you're not necessarily saying something else is the worst. You're saying this is better. If you want the one I worry about most for anti-submarine warfare tends to be I look at the German frigates, because I'm not quite sure about their hulls, but I'm told they're actually they are better than they necessarily look. So again, it's not the world is not a zero-sum game. It's not 1 or 0. It's not good must be equal bad. You can say the Type 26 is better at anti-submarine warfare than the FREM because of its hull and its shaping and its the efforts being put in. But that's probably because from its very beginning, the Type 26 has been designed as an anti-submarine warfare frigate the whole way through. No matter what cover name the Royal Navy's used for it, it's been an anti-submarine warfare frigate. It's bone deep. It's everything in it is about anti-submarine warfare. All the rest is stuff which is added on top. Nicholas Wu, does Canada even need an anti-air warfare frigate versus an ASW frigate? They need a general purpose frigate, and that's what they're building. If we go back to this, if you look at them, what is Canada building? They're building an anti-submarine warfare frigate with quite a capable anti-air defense. Actually, if you're looking at it, whilst both the Hunter and the CSC, they carry SM2s. Okay? So they have, and they'll probably be upgraded to SM6s at some point. They have an area air defense capability. But the RN has the Type 45s and is going to have the Type 83s. So they've gone for a, right then, we want a point defense air defense capability, but we want more of those missiles. So that's why the RN technically has more missiles, but it's a less capable in air defense. It's not an area air defense, it's a point defense vessel. It's able to defend itself. It's not able to defend the task group. The others have limited task group defense because they don't have a carrier as part of their battle group, and they don't have the Australians do have 3 destroyers, but they only have 3 destroyers, whereas the Royal Navy has 6. Honestly, the Constellations are quite a hefty redesign of the Italian frame, but they are based on the Italian frame. Hello, Carmen. Hello, Bengram. Is there a reason why Imaginators don't seem to be trialing drones to haul towed array sonars for subwall ships outside mine clearing? It's literally because I think it's because of 2 reasons. One, it's to do with the operating in the sea states in deep water, and it's because they're building up technology in the minimal risk, in the lowest risk area. Because if they have a loss, that might stop them getting funding. So you develop it up, and you keep building it, and you keep building on it, and you eventually have the capability. And it's a very, how do I put it? It then becomes a low risk swap, and that's what they're going for. They really want a low risk swap. So that's what's holding it up. It's being done in currently the most low risk fashion possible. Sorry, I'm just fixing something on the computer. I love that these numbers are less than the PLC pumps out a year. Yeah, but they do have a lot of yards working on it. As for ASW versus anti-air warfare, since a dinky 400 tubs can fling even 4 sub-launched anti-ship missiles at you, and there are Russian SSGNs, an ASW ship must have serious air defense. Preferably up to medium range. I don't know about up to medium range, but certainly it's got enough. And this is the Royal Canadian Navy in World War II. You'll notice they only have 2 cruisers, but they also have 2 escort carriers down here. And they have a huge fleet. Tribal class destroyers, all sorts of escorts, all sorts of different destroyers and frigates. It's colossal. Often forgotten. Canadian Navy in World War II, one of the largest navies in the world. All right. There's a full debate going on about EH-101 versus S-92. I will say actually the differences between the way you operate. If you operate with the EH-101 suits a more distributed operation policy in anti-submarine warfare. The S-92 is better if you do a more integrated warfare. So the EH-101 is supposed to prosecute, on the British doctrine, prosecute submarines solo, with or without any reference to the surface ship if necessary. And this is one of the reasons why the Type 26s in the RNs looking at are potentially going to be carrying 2 Merlins. Or possibly a whole load of VLS, because the idea is, not VLS, a whole load of drones. And the idea is potentially use the drones to work with the frigate, to do the anti-submarine warfare with the frigate, and the EH-101 goes off and does it on its own. So you end up with a helicopter playing long range anti-submarine warfare and doing boom, and going in a sort of a wider area, and the frigate doing task group sector defense basically with its drones. We'll see. Vision. RNCN was the third biggest fleet by 1945 report. Pretty much. Mm-hmm. What's the small text under the submarine picture? Training submarine. Mm-hmm. So let's consider where they're operating. And again, I've got this one from we can sort of talk about World War II versus World War I. The Royal Navy is expected to go around the world, and honestly, one of the problems you have in modern politics is that nations that governments and politicians effectively think and believe that you should still have Royal Navy 1930s level of presence on what was 1930s Dutch budgets and numbers. You can't do that. But this is what we're dealing with. Australia is still orientated around China, East Indies, Australia, and New Zealand sort of station. That's where they really focus on. Although you must remember, in World War II, they were also quite heavily present in the Eastern Mediterranean. New Zealand managed to get all the way to the South Atlantic and take part in the Battle of the River Plate. Always fun. The Canadians, well, they're a kind of Atlantic and Pacific, but they always seem to end up more concentrating on the Atlantic. Eskimo, Vancouver, Prince Rupert, those are their sort of critical basing areas still in this day, but they are always almost more reticent getting involved in the Pacific. I think principally that comes down to the fact that they tend to try and avoid being in a position where they could end up having to disagree with their neighbors to the south. In Atlantic, they have a huge area. They are completely out there and they are it's all their coast, and they're going up into the north to the Arctic. But on the Pacific, they are sandwiched between America and America in Alaska. So they've sort of been more reticent about that, and they didn't really have the same level of force over there as they had in the Atlantic. But I think these days they're looking at a more duality of approach. They're looking at a more to have a more balanced approach, and I have a feeling this is behind the 15 frigate number. I wouldn't be surprised if that 15 frigates turns into about 8 based on one coast and 7 on the other coast. with potentially the 7 being on the Atlantic coast. Again, the reason is there's more allies on the Atlantic coast. For Australia, as I said, its area is the same. For Britain, we have a problem. We have a problem. We are not able to, we're not going to do area focus because you can look around the world and you can pick out islands everywhere, and pretty much anywhere in the world you can find an island which still has a British flag on it. If we go into this area, you can find somewhere in here the Spratlys. Of course, the Falkland Islands, South Georgia, Sandwich Islands, Ascension, and a few others going up there. We have Gibraltar in the Mediterranean. For all its fighting and arguing over it, technically still Diego Garcia. All those things are still part of the British, and we have to protect them. They come with exclusive economic zones. We also have alliances. We have the Commonwealth, we have Five Eyes, we have AUKUS, we have NATO, we have all these things which are important to our security, so their security is important to us. And so we're going up and around. Now, this means you have to start thinking through your escorts. And this caused interesting discussions recently, because there was an interesting discussion recently in one of these lives on the Type 45s. And I forget who it was, but someone was making the case that the Type 45 is a bad destroyer because it's not general purpose. And I pointed out, well, if you only have 6 vessels, and so you have 2 per group, and you only have 2 available, if they're general purpose, then you're tempted to send them off elsewhere. And that means they go off elsewhere, and you lack your air defense ship when you need 2 for your carrier. It's the same with frigates for anti-submarine warfare. So yes, it's gonna the Type 26s are going to have the advantage over the Type 23s of having those Mark 41 VLS. They're going to be able to take Tomahawks. They're going to be able to take to provide a strike attack in support of the F-35s. And all these things are excellent. But that also means, and this is where I get worried, that means you're going to be tempted to detach them from your task group. And this is where I start to reckon we need more than 8. Because I think you have 8 because in theory that's your 2 for each task group and 2 to cover the role of the ballistic missile, protecting ballistic missile submarine in UK and that sort of duty. But I think if you're honestly going to have them as a detachable force, then you actually don't need 8, you need 12. Because then you can have 3 per task group. And then if you want to detach 1 to go and launch a strike with its Tomahawks, that's fine. If you want to detach 2 so they can go out there, protect each other, and launch a strike, that's fine. You still have 1 with the Chaos group. And the odds are those 2 will be able to support each other to get back, because between them they're carrying 96 C-Sector missiles. So the odds are they at least get back to the task group. But you don't want to be in a scenario where you have only 2 of a type of a ship with your task group. You have to deploy. You don't want to deploy both because you can't afford to lose both, because you can't really afford to lose 1. But you have to follow the political requests, instructions, and move your frigate forward. That's a problem. So the original CASC was to have separate anti-submarine warfare and AOW warfare variants. That was dropped because it was viewed by the RCN that having 1 design would save on basically all costs. It does in the long run, because it also, think about it this way. If you have 1 ship which is a 70% solution for both roles, or even a 80% solution for both roles, then you have 15 of those ships, if they build them, let's say. Now, on a third, you're generating 5. But in reality, when you've got 15, you're probably going to be able to keep about available of at least 9 of them available at any one time, possibly even more than that. because of the law of the way the large numbers work in terms of fleet maintenance. So you can put together a decent task group, and they can work together. Hmm. MC Legend 13. In the American terms today, I'm unsure if we have enough vessels for protecting onto interests. We don't. That's an easy answer question. Sub question. I know that the weapons have become more deadly, but do the Chinese have enough raw subhulls for a hard blockade of Australia, India, or both to match World War II convoy war? I wouldn't say so at the moment because most of their submarines are SSKs and most of them are quite noisy SSKs. So I don't think they could actually manage it at the moment. Hmm. So, first thing first, to compare against their World War II counterparts. Well, let's compare them in World War II. The RN's World War II RN Town class, which are the equivalent of the City class, hence Glasgow and Birmingham here, they're light cruisers. They're actually the big, very powerful light cruisers. They're the we're so big and powerful light cruisers. People are the Japanese think we might actually be able to be converted into heavy cruisers. Cruisers. They're the surface, and they really not surface raiders, but have all the capabilities of a surface raider because they're anti-surface raider surface raiders. Cruisers. They're pretty essential in every single theater of war, and they carry 12 6-inch guns. They are general purpose par excellence. That's useful. Adhad, wouldn't you want a destroyer and a frigate to be split off? If you just send frigates, the enemy sends planes. If you send destroyers, they send subs. Well, the trouble is the RN's destroyers don't carry don't carry Mark 41 VLSs, so don't have enough. Don't really offer anything for a Tomahawk strike, and again, you're presuming the old dimension of they send planes to attack frigates, and you go, well, these frigates are carrying about between them 96 Sea Scepter VLS. Sea Scepters. That doesn't really work out the same. And just presuming that you have a Type 45 along with an extra 48 Sea Vipers and 24 Sea Scepters, so that takes you up to 72 Sea Scepters and 48. That's still only 120 versus 96 missiles. So that's 60 engagements rather than 48. And then that's 24 less Tomahawks for the strike. So, the RN Town class, and I haven't got into what the Type 26's equivalent are in World War II. The Town class ones in World War II are your super cruisers, basically, your super light cruisers. And they are things which are designed to rain 6-inch guns, 6-inch shells down on you as fast and as furiously as possible. But this is the Royal Navy's ones. Okay, Ran. You're not. The Royal Australian Navy is not helping me on this one. They've gone for the Hunter class, where there isn't a Hunter class. They've got Tasman and they've got Hunter, which both don't have a precedent. There is an HMAS Tasmania, which was an S-class destroyer. There is an HMAS Flinders, which was a survey ship. But no. So they don't. I was looking for name precedents because the RN class is, of course, Town class becomes City class. That's fine. And then there's the RCN class. Well, it's still called the Canadian Surface Combatant, CSC. So I looked into their things and their namings, and I decided, right then, the potential names that come from are the River class. So they had River class destroyers, such as HMCS Sangway, and they had River class frigates, which none of them are named after rivers, let alone rivers in Canada. They're all Royal Navy. They're all River class frigates, which the Royal Navy doesn't is naming for the. I'm not sure who's in charge of the naming of these frigates, because whoever is doing a bang up job of never getting them named after a river. So my suggestion for the Canadian surface combatant, especially if they want to go for something which is politically neutral naming, potentially river class. They're pretty effective, though, for the Royal Navy, and they're pretty effective for the RCN. So these are good ships to be named for. But that does present a problem. What the RN and RCN really seem to be looking to, though. Because let's be honest, what are they building? They're building a general purpose frigate, or smaller escort, as the tribal destroyers were in World War II, that can be used in pretty much all roles. Has an anti-air warfare capability, but also an anti-submarine capability and anti-ship capability. They're pretty much they want a general purpose asset. They want it called a frigate. It's called a destroyer because they don't want to build a lot of what's bigger. The Canadians don't want to build destroyers. They just don't. They seem to be worried about that name. And the Australians don't want to admit that they didn't really buy that great a destroyer with the Hobart class, so they don't want to buy a destroyer. And the Royal Navy's got ships which are destroyers, so they don't want to buy many more destroyers. But leaving that to one side, for both the Royal Australian Navy and Royal Canadian Navy, what they're looking for is tribal class ships. They're looking for something which comes from the category below, but can punch above its weight. Can provide a fill-in for roles of capital ship in terms of presence. Can provide an anti-air defense capability. Can provide the anti-submarine capability and the anti-surface capability. So they're looking for an all-round escort that is going to provide them with the numbers. So they are looking for a tribal class destroyer in modern versions. Miss Maverick 32, River class may not work though. The discussion is happening about the changing of current names to indigenous names. That could work very well for it if you think about it, because that could be a way of announcing the new names to the world by giving the ships the new names. Oh, the Australians have gone for the Hunter class. What the RN is looking for, though, it's not a tribal class destroyer. And this is the interesting thing. We're talking more about spiritually, they're looking at a Dido, which was, as I've always said, a destroyer a cruiser designed on destroyer lines. It's basically supposed to be able to spam anything that comes in range. Submarines, ships, aircraft, everything will get spammed. But they also want a primary anti-submarine warfare vessel, which is what the Black Swan was class. So they're looking at something which can spam the air and sea, but most importantly, can provide a lethal anti-submarine warfare capability. So, fun times. MC Legend 13H. I wonder what modern British, European, and Japanese crews would be like. Maybe something similar to the Tikongas or Slavas or something else entirely. Interesting, even if it's never happened. Wait for the Type 83s when they come along. I wouldn't be surprised if they look like they will be called a destroyer, but the difference between them and a cruiser will be very, very small. Can you imagine if the RN named the ship after the river that runs through Oxford? They mean the Thames. I think they have got a name the ships after the Thames in the past. So, this becomes the sort of discussion question because I've got through to here, and I honestly thought this is going to be one of those patrons which is going to end up with a lot of discussions and a long discussion, and that's why I've got it to this point. Because it's all based on what are these ships being built for, and what do they propose for, what are their past roles. And it was an interesting one when I got to it because I was honestly opposed to calling them the tribal class or saying they were near to the tribal class because, as you know, those ships are kind of special to me. And I've done a book about them, which is out on Kindle from Pen and Sword and is supposed to be out out soon, available to be delivered. And shock horror, hopefully a box is coming to me, and I intend on. Let's put it this way. My family are watching this. The book's going to be your Christmas present this year. Just get used to that idea. I'm going to expect you to have read it as well. There will be a quiz on New Year's Day. But leaving that to one side, and before anyone starts commenting, that was a joke. I do have to remember there are some people who can't understand when a British person is being funny. But what are the Type 26s for? Well, this actually task group is kind of interesting to me. If you're in the Royal Navy, this is what the Type 26s are for. They're replacing the Type 23s. They are the anti-submarine warfare component of a battle group. But if you're in the Canadian or Australian Navy, they're more like the HLMS Everston. They are a general purpose asset. They are supposed to do anti-submarine warfare, but they're also supposed to do anti-air warfare. They're supposed to be able to fix into the two. And you could say, in a way, they're sort of like the Arleigh Burke from that perspective, but they're actually probably better at anti-submarine warfare than the Arleigh Burke is by a hefty margin. I love the Arleigh Burkes on many, many reasons, but the US Navy's Arleigh Burkes and anti-submarine warfare is not a match made in heaven. They try their best. They really do, but they were not. They weren't designed for it in the first place, and they've never been. They've got good helicopter suites. That's what we'll say. But when they were designed, there were these things called frigates, Oliver Hazard Perry class, which were actually, for all their box-like cookie-cutter shape, actually quite decent for their time in anti-submarine warfare, and they took the lead. And that was fine. And then someone got rid of them and didn't replace them. And the poor Burkes had to step up, and the Burkes were air warfare general-purpose destroyers. And that's just cruel. But you've also got to remember, in the Royal Navy, they've got the HMS Defender and HMS Diamond here. So they've got two Type 45 destroyers. They're air warfare destroyers. So you're actually looking at different navies with very different things. The Royal Navy is building a task group. They're building a task group around this. Queen Elizabeth class carrier. That's what the Royal Navy's focuses on for global projection, for being its presence around the world. They are focusing in on building a task group, on building something which works wherever it goes in the world. And for that, they need anti-submarine warfare capability, they need anti-air capability, they need some these things. This is what they're building. But again, what are the Australians and Canadians building? Well, for them, if they're doing global reach, they're going to be slotting into someone else's task group. So they need to bring something which is quite good for that task group. So something which is capable for anti-submarine warfare is going to be attractive to the Americans and the Brits. Something which also has anti-air capability is going to be very attractive to the Brits. So the thing is, they can leverage a lot of capability and a lot of influence from having sister ships which will slot in well into other people's task groups. And yes, the Australians do have the Canberra class. Yes, they do have an LHD they might be supporting, and they might well go forward with a Hobart class and some Type 26s with them. And that's certainly a likely possible strike group. But the reality is, what they're looking for is different, and this affects how they design their ships. And again, you can go back to the tribal class destroyers in World War II. HMS Bataan or HMAS Bataan was often working alongside the USS Bataan, and they were often doing work together. That was an American carrier. This was the other Australian tribal class destroyer. It was a useful combination, and it's a similar thing. So when you're looking at their capabilities, remember, these ships' capabilities aren't about standalone. It's not about building a ship. I try and get people away from this. You are not, if the Navy's going to thinking about building ships, they're not thinking about building a ship, they're thinking about building a fleet. They're not going, top trumps, oh, we must build the best, or this must be, it must all have maximum of high fire grades and these ones and these people. They're not, that's not what they're thinking. They're thinking of, these are the roles we believe we need a ship to do. This is what we will build for it. And if it works out top trumps versus another one, that's great. If it doesn't, that doesn't really bother them because it's how it fits in the fleet. Declan, I want one of the Type 83s to be called Hood and just daring the Jones to call the ship Bismarck. That'd be quite funny. Take care, gentlemen. Shrike, you mean the River Channel? I'm not sure. Also, do we have an idea as to when your Type 83 write-up is coming out? I have, well, currently it's going through final checks between me and Drac, and then it should be published. We've got suggestions and stuff back from SimSec. They were very appreciative, and we're doing some modifications to it, and then it's going to go up. That'd be an amazing Christmas present. Oh, they'll get in the books as Christmas presents. The fact that there won't actually be a test though on New Year's Day, unless anyone critiques my cooking of a turkey. If you critique the cooking of the turkey, or actually no, I'm doing roast beef this year on Christmas Day. If you critique the cooking of the roast beef, you will have to answer a 40 question multiple choice test on my book. I'll make sure they all eat it. And again, before anyone worries, yes, I am going to be doing a nut roast. Well, a variation on a nut roast. I'm doing something which is my own creation, which is a variation on sort of a. Well, we're going to see how it works. So far, it's worked out quite well. My testing. If it works out well in my works out in on New Year's Day, I might actually share the recipe. But I have got something for the vegetarians. I haven't got any vegans to deal with at the moment. Leonard, HMS Aveston anti-submarine frigate. Ford is more anti-air destroyer. It is more of an anti-air destroyer, well, anti-air frigate in many respects, but it is capable of anti-submarine warfare. It's more capable than the Arleigh Burke. So it's a sort of backup option. It's the third frigate / fourth anti-air ship. Generally, the distinction between cruiser and destroyer frigates becomes so nonsensical. The Belgian rating system makes more sense. That's the point of the rating system. AdFab, is the whole DRN outside of the 31, 32, and SSBN obviously going to be centered around carrier strike? Potentially. A lot of it is going to be yes. Where does the Type 32 fit in all this? And Albion and Bulwark need replacing as well. Albion and Bulwark, well, that's an interesting debate going on. There are lots of people who are putting forward some very interesting ideas, but I have a funny feeling an LHD design could end up winning out. As for the Type 32, that's going to be distributed mine warfare frigate. So basically, it's going to be probably a Type 31 orientated around being a mothership to the mine warfare assets. So rating system is going to be hopefully part of the Type 83 paper. Amphib. The RN is about carrier strike. How does Amphib fit in that? No mag equivalent? That's what the literal strike groups are for. And possibly something more. It's called the ISIS where it passes through Oxford. No, it's the turkey on Christmas Day. It's the beef is on New Year's Day. I don't think the book is. I'm not sure when the book is in the warehouses now, and my family will get there. If I get sent, I'm supposed to be sent as an author a box of books, so they'll be going to family as Christmas presents. Oh. John Shea, small question. On the rating system, would a 21 cell RIM 116 system not count? That's become an interesting question to think about, and honestly, no, it doesn't, as we decided, because it's too short-ranged. So the rolling airframe missiles are good, but we're not counting close-in weapon systems, and they haven't yet. They're not in the range to it. So the lowest we'd go is ESSM and C-Scepter, and BLS for that. Otherwise, it's close-in weapon system. And there was even a debate about whether or not to count the main gun or not. And honestly, we decided not to in the end, I think. So anyway, okay. So because I want to show the rating system in my presentation as an intro into modern naval warfare, and I would like to put a paper as a source and not a podcast or dude, trust me. It will be out as soon as we can, and if necessary, if you want to message me and Drac on Discord, we will. I'll see if Drac is happy about sending you an early copy. Modern navies, as in modern Polish navies, Polish modern navy is really skewed, but I think that getting from history, corvettes suit Hunt class names, but frigates definitely historical destroyer names. Take care, Stafford. All right. If we're running out of questions, this might actually be one of the quickest lives we had in ages. Going back to just explain this a little bit more, because I do reckon I'm going to get some questions down below. So, the rating system is based on the number of VLS they have, in terms of that can take a point defense missile or higher. It doesn't include the option of quad packing, because that's not in itself a VLS tube. It's literally the cell. The cell gives you the option for quad packing, but you might just have one missile, you might have four, which is, again, why we get to this interesting scenario of this CSC. As configured, its configuration currently proposed, it is a 64, or a low-range third rate. But in reality, it's only a 46. In reality, it's a 46. So in reality, it's a fifth rate. The British one is a 72. Now, here is the thing. You can, theoretically, I think they've done testing for it, and quad pack can. So if I was going to include quad packs in there, and let's say I took all the 24 marks of Mark 41 cells, and I quad packed in C-Sector in there, as well as the 96 and the 48 C-Sector missiles as well, then you would be talking about 144 missiles, in which case technically, you could say, a first rate, or well beyond the first rate. But the thing is, that's not really honest, because that's not the number of VLS cells she has. So this is why quad packing is, to me, an issue, and why I put the CSC technically as a fifth rate, because I went by the number of VLS cells. And it's the same with the Hunt class, and it's the same with the City class. If I'm being honest, they're all going through the cell numbers. Carmen, I do deeply want this to be a build trumps with Type 31, Type 32, and Type 83. Well, I haven't sent through the ideas for tomorrow's build trumps yet. Hopefully Darren will have railguns by the time the Type 83 comes online. Do you think a lot of guns will be added, like old-style cruisers and battleships, or will just one railgun be on a ship too? It depends on technology and depends on the viability, but I would hope at least 2 turrets would be added with one gun each, but I'd prefer 2 twins if they're available by then, and that's a big if. The main trouble we're having with railguns is sorting out the energy supply, and you could quite easily fit it by making your escorts nuclear powered, but no one wants to do that. No, Scott, can VLS be reloaded while underway, or is it something that can only be done while alongside? Well, theoretically, some US Navy ships retain the ability to do it underway, but in reality, no one actually seems to practice it that often, and no one in the other navies seem to have that ability. So, honestly, I reckon they're going to have to go into port somewhere to have it reloaded. Yeah, I'm not going for the 6-bird roast. That's far too complicated. One question. Hello option for each version. What do you think? Do you think the EH101 Wildcat, Black Hawk, and Canada has the best option? What Canada has was the best option. I think each Navy has gone and chosen what they want. With the British, they've gone for Wildcats or Merlins, and that's what they have because that suits their roles. If the frigate is Type 26 finds itself on long term, I have a feeling that the Wildcats will end up focused on the Type 31s and the Type 45s and eventually Type 83s, and the Merlins will end up focused on the Type 26s. Because the Merlins are more the anti-submarine warfare helicopter, and the link of the Wildcat is far more the general purpose asset. Graham Hunter, if there were still BB's battleships around the world, would we form a strike group around them or just add them to a strike group formed around a carrier? Probably the latter. I might well use them as detached assets occasionally from that strike group, but I probably put them in as part of the carrier strike group. No. VLS tubes only count once. Even if they're hypersonic, they only count once. They only count as one tube because it's only one tube. You can only fire one missile from that tube. Even if you do have the hypersonic ones, and they are the big ones which can have our systems slotted in them, and that does seem to be one of the options the Americans are looking at for the Virginians, especially. That's great, but they're still only one tube, and they only count once. This actually did cause some interesting discussions when we were looking at the Soviets and some of the Russian ships, and because some of their missiles are quite so massive. But the trouble is, once you start getting into gradients, it becomes very, very complicated. And then you look at history and you go, well, in the nicest way, in the rating system, we didn't ask whether it was a 18-pounder or a 36-pounder cannon. We just asked how many cannons it was pierced for. And it's the same with the VLS, so we went with the same with the VLS. For in the way simplicity. Now, is the CAM C-Sept a relatable C? Potentially more than the Mark 41 VLS. Potentially more, but it's still going to not be that easy. Military, what's the Korean? I think Korean naval, Korean vessel. There is a. I think I know which Korean vessel you're talking about. I think you're talking about Sejong the Great class, which, by my count, carry. Let's see, 128 plus 16. That's 144. Yeah, 144. So they're definitely in the first rate strategy. They're in the we're so big we're practically a Spanish ship category. Thank you, Cameron. Really enjoyed a stream on the contemporary subject. Well, I do try and do them. It's patron choice. This is the patron choices, and I do try and do them. Darius Ransky, if you had the power needed, do you think you can a railgun and fire as fast as both as 40mm? Probably. But you would need a lot of power and a very quick resupply. Even if people were there that could reload BLS and C on a ship with cranes, I'll bet the missiles aren't in the replenishment at sea supply on the train. More than likely not. This is another reason why aircraft carriers are useful, and this is one of the reasons why you get into those people go, oh, yeah, there's no future aircraft carriers. You can actually resupply the missiles for aircraft to a carrier at sea and rearm them. So, yeah. Pretty much it's your one of your most flexible assets for operations and for giving you your air defense, anti-land strike, and anti-submarine, and all those things can be reloaded on it at sea. So, yeah, that, and you can also resupply shells at sea quite easily to ships and guns. Dan, are the Merlins due for replacement circa 2030? Pretty much. Shrike 142. Do you think lengthening the Queen Elizabeths and retrofitting them with cats would be viable? You could do it if you're prepared to pay an amount of money. And F-35 is having no more issues than anything. In that, so Cameron's Tempest is entirely theoretical. And looking at the current design work for its how do I put this? Its airframe and its undercarriage, I don't think it's going to be naval viable, but they'd have to do a lot of work. It's kind of like the naval Eurofighter. Everyone talked about it as being a great idea until anyone actually looked into it and realized they'd have to rebuild the entire thing and redesign the entire thing to actually get a naval version of it. So if you're prepared to write them a blank check, they'll do it. but you'll have to write them a blank check. Other than that, you're living with the F-35 and enjoy it. It's perfectly fine. Yes, there's been a crash, but dirty little secret. There were crashes due to issues on various things, even during World War II in the height of wartime. The trouble is, no, you lose aircraft in operations, especially at sea, because you've got them landing on something which is going up and down like this as it moves. And sometimes it goes off at an angle, way or no angle, because of the way it waves. So it's constantly moving. It causes fun, but we'll find out what the details are. So, how would you count ship-launched anti-ship ballistic missiles? Same as VLS system? Same as VLS system. Sejong. Sejong the Great. And Fab, that's the issue which you heard. If you've listened to the recent episode 73 of Bill Trump's, that's one of the issues you have. How many missiles are waiting for you back at port? So the Slava class cruisers with 16 SN12 don't count for your rating system due to not being VLS, or is that observation? No, they do count because we count those extra missiles. They're still major missiles. We still count harpoons, and they're not in the VLS. We still count those. So those are not in the VLS, but they are missile launch points, and they are strike missiles. They're proper sized missiles, basically. So legend, the Russians are the last country to have ships that are around couple of ships in the size of massive Kirov class Guided missile cruisers. Take a stream one day on them. Potentially. If people ask for it, I'm happy to do it. Manu 1600, this has been a crash of what exactly? An F-35 went into the Mediterranean. Strike one for it is more that we keep cutting the orders. I love your belief that Shrike. I love your faith that we keep cutting the orders of F-35 and we're not going to cut the orders of Tempest. This is the trouble is we haven't made the orders of F-35. We haven't cut any orders. We haven't made them yet. And this is the thing. People keep asking what the final order number is, and our governments keep pushing it down the road. Because, honestly, governments would like to buy as few as possible because they like to spend the money on other things which they view as more vote winners. But they're going to buy as many as they have to do the job they need to do. So they might end up buying 96. They might end up buying even more than that. Or they might try and get away with less. The reality is it's going to depend on what they think the likelihood of war is and what they think the likelihood is of them having to use them and what they think the likelihood is of blowback on them if they don't have them available when they need them. Okay, if you made the Queen Elizabeth bigger, where are you going to do that, and then where could you get a home port? Probably would have to do the work at Camel Lairds, because that's the only yard which I'd trust with the job of ripping a carrier in half and putting it back together in the UK. And in which case you're going to have to extend their dock facility. Well, as everyone seems to be finished the questions on the Type 26s, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching. It's 9 o'clock my time, so I'm going to go in and see the fluffies and cook some food because I haven't had anything so far today. I'm so far surviving off Iron Brew. What have we got coming up? We have Brewship 61 on the 21st of November. And then on 25th of November, we have Patron 37. Repair ships from Age of Sail. They're going to be fun. And then 20th of November, Brewship 62. Now, I'm going to be doing probably a live of my own choice on the 2nd of December, but I'm going to put the 2 patron choice on the 9th and the 16th of December because I have a plan for the 23rd of December. Hope you'll enjoy that. And the 30th of December is going to be the last live this year. And then the 2nd of January is going to be Brew Ships, which hopefully will be a Brew Ships where I can show you a picture of my aunt and uncle wearing Blackburn face masks because I have managed to get to 13,000 subscribers. We can hope. Hang on, Type 26. Question. Twin Bofors, when? Oh, we love them. But it's like the BAE replaced the twin 57mm with a single 57mm because no one wanted to do the maintenance on 2 guns. And you sit there and go, well, that's fine when you can shoot when it's wars of choice and you can always turn up with a large fleet. But if you actually are in a scenario where you will find yourself in one ship and outnumbered, you want those twin guns. Right. Take care, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you. And yeah, thank you for being here. Nice to hear. I have my doubts you'll reach the 13,000 by year end. I do too, but I'm gonna keep trying. Goodness me, gracious me, I'm gonna keep trying. Seamush. The Burks have 6 torpedo tubes, towed array, and ASW. I'm not sure why that's so inferior in anti-submarine warfare. Steve, I didn't say it was inferior. I said they weren't as good. And the reason they're not as good is because they're noisy compared to a frigate, which is designed for anti-submarine warfare. They are quiet compared to a World War II frigate. But Burks weren't designed around anti-submarine warfare as a primary capability. That was a secondary skill that they will also be able to do in backup of the frigates when they were designed. That's their concept. Your auto-malaria question. I haven't seen your auto-malaria question. What was your auto-malaria question before I go? Take care, Newhouse S. And thank you, Delif Koza. Thank you, Ben Grogan. Somewhere interesting. Yeah, well, F-35 production keeps increasing and hopefully pushing cost down. That's the hope, and that hopefully means that we'll actually increase their costs. So that's the hopeful advantage. But really, the British put off purchasing them because there were all sorts of random, stupid decisions taken. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, Steve Windish. Thank you, Declan95. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Hope you enjoyed. And take care. Melanie, what's your question? Just asking before I go. Anyway, could Automalera handle the carrier in half job properly without building larger facilities? Probably not. And we probably wouldn't go to the Italians anyway. Because as much as we love them, we'd have to do it domestically in the UK. In which case, we would go to Camel Lairds and pay them enough money to build make their dry dock facility larger, and then we would have to spend a lot of money in Portsmouth. Also, when twin 4.5s, probably twin 5 inches now, because that's what we're heading towards. Anyway, take care, and thank you, and have fun. Bye. F-35 has always been designed by committee. Take care. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye.